Okay, I want to ask the question, as I have done before and no doubt shall do again. What is the cost of lies? Even lies by omission can be a disastrous cost.
I suppose it depends if you get caught.
Mm.
Or if you control the entire media and educational landscape.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there used to be a monopoly on that sort of thing by the corporate mainstream media, what we might now call the legacy media.
Oh, I'm embarrassed for things I used to believe. Back when you only had one point of view given to you.
All right, yeah. You can't really blame the vast majority of people. I mean, especially if you go back to earlier in the 20th century, you just had the radio and it told you one narrative. And unless you travelled to that place in the world to see it with your own eyeballs, you had no way of questioning it, really. Well, we just don't live in that world anymore. And the powers that be are not happy with the fact that their monopolies sliding out of their grip. Because there are things in the world more valuable than money. See the cogs working for a venture capitalist.
Bear with me. Oh yeah, family and all that sort of stuff.
Well, yeah, right.
Yes.
Yeah, well, life and, and
that.
time.
Yes.
But information, knowledge is power. Information. Gordon Greco said the most valuable commodity is information. And so we are in a sort of an information war, aren't we? A war for the truth. The truth is more valuable than money, in my opinion. I'd rather have my integrity than be extraordinarily rich.
Well, the truth is powerful for people like us who aren't really benefiting from the current system. But you can understand why the people who do benefit from the current system would be very interested in maintaining the narrative or the lie.
If your job was like Mariana Spring, if your job was to pretend to be the arbiter of truth, pretend to verify what is and isn't true, and even if that led you to peddling misinformation or false information or even outright lies, as she did in the case of Carl Benjamin.
I hope I'm not ruining your
it.
segment here, but I don't know if you've put this in your links, but somebody did do a look at the percentage of lies on her show as opposed to the BBC in general.
Right.
And she basically has more lies per episode than just the normal BBC, which is funny considering that she's supposed to be the truth teller.
Yeah, odd.
Yeah.
I was going to leave it right to the end, to the cherry on top, but why not just say it now? I mean, we know for a fact, she's lied about Carl on the very first episode. She said he went to Totnes in 2019 for his MEP campaign, and she said that he then returned. He didn't. Yeah. That he returned, like some sort of Pied Piper of Totnes, and converted half the town or whatever he radicalised them. It's just not true.
Yes. I mean, if he could do that, we would send him there.
Right. And apparently when he asked her about it on Twitter, she just blocked him. And when he tried to go through the channels on the BBC to launch a complaint, they just said, no, it's true. End of story.
Yeah, because a Green councillor told us.
But they're the arbiters of truth, are they? They verify for you what is or isn't true or real. Nonsense. We live in a new age where it's up to individual people to source their own information and make value judgments for themselves about it. And that's a much more difficult thing. It was passive before, right? You turn on the radio or you turn on the telly box and you get told something and you accept it. That's very, very passive. That's easy. Well, I'm afraid the information war is more complex than that now. So, I'm interested in sort of the nature of truth and the nature of this conflict we're involved in. I wrote an article back in, what's this first one?
2021.
Bear with me. Yeah, there's one from 20... Where's the mouse? There it is. Okay, so this first one... In 2023, I wrote an article about Creepy Joe's war on truth, because it was quite obvious, wasn't it, that that they just lie to us in all sorts of different ways. In disgusting ways, really. Perverting history, perverting just all sorts of stuff. Here's an even older one from summer 2021. We all know, we've all lived through it, right? And I talk about in the past where there's been regimes, whether it be the dictatorship of Domitian or Nero or the Soviet era or under Mao. Throughout the centuries, there's been many, many examples of regimes where you're either not allowed to know the truth, or you're told a falsehood, and you probably even know it's not true. A bit like in 1984, but you have to pretend it's true. I think Zizek once gave a quite interesting example where he said the idea that when a child knows that Santa isn't real anymore, spoiler alert, any children out there, Santa isn't real anymore, the parents know the kid knows, and yet both parties keep up the pretense that Santa is real, right? The idea, like in the Soviet Union, you know the system doesn't work, you know the economy has collapsed or is collapsing, but yet the state insists you pretend it isn't. They know you know it's broken, but they insist you keep up the pretense. Everyone knows what's going on, and yet there's this edifice of lies.
I mean, I would give a modern example, but there are too many to pick from.
Right. There are a lot, aren't there, in recent times, particularly. And anyway, it now seems there is now a censorship industrial complex, a giant thing, very, very well funded, largely from America, but not exclusively from the United States. Britain is among the other big players in this whole thing. Of lots and lots of money and lots of infrastructure around, quote unquote, battling misinformation or disinformation, when in fact the irony is that they're the peddlers largely of misinformation or disinformation, just like BBC Verify.
Well, and when you say it's big, again, I don't want to. Well, I mean, this is such a big topic. I think I can safely say this without jumping on whatever you might have coming next, but it really is a massive and industrial complex. And Dr. Parvini looked at this a while back, where he tracked it back from basically the entire propaganda apparatus from World War II was basically taken and immediately deployed at home without skipping a beat. And the funding that went into artists who promoted the right kind of message, I mean, it basically goes far further than you would have thought, and quite possibly it goes back significantly further than that as well. It's just that, you know, that was where you picked up the trail from. But it's a massive, I mean, hundreds of billions get thrown at promoting the right people to push the right messages and so on.
Well, I mean, state propaganda has been around for as long as there's been a state, right? I mean, going back to ancient times, I suppose you could say. But yeah, certainly in the post-war, World War II, that is. I'll talk about all that in a moment. But yeah, there are the biggest institutions are behind it, like the State Department and the Pentagon and the intelligence services and things, and funded by the state in all sorts of ways. So, I mean, we're interested in this sort of thing. We did a bit of content, when was it? In November last year. Yeah, in November last year. You and me had a conversation about the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
That was a good episode, that.
Well, I thought it was an excellent conversation. Anyone who hasn't subscribed, if you're watching this on YouTube, go over to lotuseaters.com. For as small as £5 a month, you can see everything behind the paywall. And there's a very interesting conversation there where we talk about this guy's book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, largely talking about the 60s and 70s, isn't it, and into the 80s. About how the American empire, because let's call it what it is, it's obviously not the same as an old school 18th, 19th century British Empire or a medieval or...
No, in any way, it's
empire,
smarter than that.
Well, they saw the way the British Empire went, the Americans this is, when they became the colossus of the world after World War II, straddled the world like a colossus. They realised that if they're going to be the dominant force, the hegemon of the world, and keep it for any amount of time, they can't do it the way the British Empire did it. They can't do it the way the Mongols, the Romans did it. It doesn't work. You end up with something like the British Raj in India, and eventually they'll throw you off and throw you out. So there's more than one way to skin a cat, though. You can do it through money.
Debt.
You can do it debt. You can do it through so-called soft power. I don't particularly like that term, but most people know what is meant by it.
I mean, for the viewers, the very short version of the book is that, yes, the US Empire will use its aircraft carriers and beach landings and all the rest of it to get its way if it really wants to. But actually, most of the work is cleaned up a long time before that with the economic hitmen.
Let us, America, or the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank, let us loan you an insane amount of money You then spend that money with our companies.
Yes.
We'll build infrastructure in your country.
Yes.
And the net result of all of that is that we essentially control you.
Yeah, I mean, the money...
If you don't, we'll send in CIA kill teams. And if that doesn't work, we'll send in the Marines and aircraft carriers.
Yeah.
That's the deal.
Yeah.
In a nutshell.
And I mean, when we say America, we don't mean, the nice people who listen to this. We're talking about, a small handful of elites, because this money never leaves America. It basically goes straight from the central bank, the Treasury, where it's loaned to them by the central bank, straight to the big defence contractors. It never leaves. It's basically just recycling debt burden on some other country so that the money goes straight to the lobbyists of the people who agreed to send the money in the first place. And
maybe a dam or two or an airfield or two gets built in Venezuela or wherever.
Most of which isn't particularly useful, and most of which is built... I mean, all the roads are not built for the convenience of the locals. They're built to make sure that the resources can be extracted, sent to the nearest port, and then shipped to the US.
Mm. Right, so that's a new way of doing empire, isn't it?
Yes.
You don't necessarily have like an actual Raj type situation, but to all intents and purposes, you control...
In this, you're very happy for the local elites to get obscenely rich as well.
Yeah.
So you kind of do have the Raj.
They've got to have a piece.
Yeah. But the ultimate thing of empire is you still get your tribute.
Right. Yeah. Mm. That was just a bit of an aside. But yeah, what you talked about a moment ago, the idea that that there's the intelligence services to deal with foreign affairs, the blowback is turned on America itself. Mm. So the idea that during the Cold War you could use media outlets, the war of words, in the Eastern Bloc, or countries close to the Eastern Bloc, or any other country that's up for grabs, use media outlets and all sorts of other organs to manipulate public opinion and get what you want, ultimately. Well, what about if that was turned on America itself? That the intelligence services manipulated media in order to manipulate public opinion for their own ends in America.
I mean, given that they very explicitly...
And Britain and France and Germany and Italy.
Yeah, given that they very explicitly say that this is what they do in order to advance US interests in other countries, if they develop that skill set, it does seem a bit of a stretch to believe that they would never use it at home in order to advance their interests there as well.
Right.
I know that's very illegal for them to do, but I can't believe they wouldn't do it.
Well, the CIA, for example, is foreign intelligence, isn't it? It's not supposed to really do anything in the United States or act against US citizens, unless they say it's counter-espionage,
right, okay.
In which case they do need to work within the United States, don't they? They can do what they want, almost, right? So in the 70s, in 1975 or something, Senator Church had a committee looking into what the CIA was doing, the Church Committee. And he did uncover some bad things that they were doing.
I can imagine.
Manipulating all sorts of things. And at the time, the CIA sort of said, okay, we'll stop doing that then. Like they had Operation Mockingbird. Most people will know that. There's a Wikipedia page, you can read about Mockingbird. It's a matter of record. This was their operations to use the mainstream media to manipulate public opinion. In this article I wrote in summer of last year, I said that we're still living in the shadow of Mockingbird, because although the CIA said they would stop doing it, they obviously didn't stop doing it. And with the advent of the internet and social media and things, they're just elbow deep in that, aren't they, as well, obviously. One classic example is the Hunter Biden laptop.
Yeah.
So I'd actually like to read a bit from my article, if that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just said, remember that time when Joe Biden told the world that Hunter's laptop was a Russian plant, a foreign misinformation stratagem, and as if to prove that assertion, he reminded us that more than 50 former senior intelligence officials had signed their name to an open letter confirming it as such. Remember that? Senior intelligence officials, including many of the most powerful and connected spooks the deep state could muster, and they are sort of the most important ones. People that have led the CIA or their chiefs of staff, and other people, names like James Clapper. So I say, of course, we know the laptop was real. Like Giuliani had it independently checked almost straight away. It's not.
Well, the other big clue, of course, is that Hunter Biden has just been pardoned for the crimes that were on that laptop, which 51 former intelligence agents told us was made up. Okay, well, why has he been pardoned for it then?
One of the arguments they make is they say that, well, okay, so the information on it might be real or something, but it was the story that the laptop from hell was peddled by Russian sources, Russian media sources. Therefore, if you amplify that, you're then in collusion with the Russians in some way, and you're a threat to democracy.
That is a very tortuous logic.
Yeah. Well, this is what we'll get into. The way that exact argument has been is being used now. That if you question the mainstream media, if you question the legitimacy of the New York Times or something, then you're a threat to democracy. So, yeah. I say, for those old enough and savvy enough, it will come as no shock whatsoever that the intelligence services and the corporate mainstream media often work in concert against the public. That a savage and vicious shadow government in direct partnership with particular media outlets in an effort to manipulate the perception of reality for nefarious reasons is a revealed truth which has been with us since the 1970s. And then I talk about Senator Church's committee on it. And there were others. There was the Pike Committee and the Rockefeller Commission, all sorts of things. They uncovered MK-Ultra, among other things, Operation Shamrock and Operation Mockingbird. And as I say here, as you mentioned what AA has said, it goes back to the war. Yeah, ever since the OSS and the Dulles years. And there was a fairly famous, most people probably haven't heard of him, but if you know about the history of the CIA, fairly famous CIA operative, Frank Wisner, who talked about this sort of thing. And he talked about the Great Wurlitzer. A Wurlitzer is just a very old-fashioned word for a jukebox.
Okay.
He talked about the Great Wurlitzer, that they, the CIA, the intelligence services, the deep state, the blob, whatever you want to call it, they pick the tune.
Right.
They press the button on the jukebox, and everyone else has to dance to that tune.
Right.
And they had let's say they had a complete monopoly on it back then. Not so much anymore.
They had a really good run.
Yeah, they had a good.
Yeah.
They had a good run, all right. Yeah. So now, is the Wurlitzer coming to a stop, or there's just more than one being played at the same time? I mentioned that whether actually a CIA front or simply being manipulated and used at various points by the intelligence services, the New York Times, the New York Post, the Washington Post, CBS, Time Magazine, Newsweek. Alan Dulles used to be able to call up certain editors at Time Magazine or CBS or something, and just say, I've got this narrative, I've got this story, get one of your guys, it can't come from me, it's all hush-hush, it doesn't come directly from the CIA, but get one of your guys to write this story with this angle and publish it. And they'll just be like, yes, sir.
I suspect it's been formalised to the point where a whole bunch of journalists within these organisations have a sort of direct contact at the intelligence agencies. And it's perhaps why whenever news breaks on a sort of geopolitical bent over the weekend...
Nowadays, you mean?
Yeah, nowadays.
Yeah.
Nowadays.
Nothing stopped.
Yeah, when news breaks over the weekend, the news anchors don't know what to do with it until Monday morning when their government three-letter agency contact comes back to their desk and gives them the line to take.
Well, we know for a fact there's a liaison between the FBI and Facebook, for example.
Yes.
Don't we? Or when Elon's Twitter papers...
Yeah, the Twitter files, yeah.
Twitter files. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's that thing where you get all the different mainstream media outlets saying the exact same thing. In fact, I say here, ever wondered how it is possible for so many news outlets with completely different owners and editorial teams to wind up spewing the exact same message? Like, the walls are closing in on Trump, the walls are closing in on Trump.
You get those compilations where they overlay like 50 of them at once saying the exact same thing.
Yeah. How is that possible? How did so many of the mainstream media just all decide that, oh yeah, the Hunter laptop thing is real, and anyone questioning it is a Russian plant, and oh look, here's all these intelligence guys saying it, so it must be true.
Almost like there's a puppet master somewhere.
Well, there was a very interesting podcast, I thought, about a week ago. Joe Rogan with Mike Benz, 3-hour one. Very, very, very interesting. One of the more interesting Joe Rogan podcasts I've seen in a long time. And he used to work at the State Department, and he said he wrote a few speeches for Trump.
I almost got him on Brokenomics, but because he was in London for a while, but scheduling didn't allow it in the end.
I'd like to have a conversation with him.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. He put a bit more meat on the bones, because my article sort of stops talking about the old SSS stuff and Mockingbird, and then just saying it's still happening today. And then I sort of leave it there. It wasn't a particularly long article. But he puts a lot more meat on the bones of what's going on these days. And it is sort of extremely worrying. The idea that in the early days of the Ukraine stuff, 2014, that, yeah, they were just doing the same old thing, the intelligence services, manipulating, trying to manipulate public perception in Ukraine for Ukrainians. But then when the Trump thing happened in 2016, it flipped over to, we'll use it internally in America to stop Trump.
Yes, and he's got this great bit on the convoluted logic that they used in their own minds to justify it. Even though it's blatantly illegal, it's blatantly against, it's obvious that they should not be doing this. They managed to twist it so that their definition of democracy basically became what they and their friends think.
Well, yeah, it's the idea that any threat to their institutions or their assets,
yes,
whether that be the actual building at Langley or the Zelensky government, whatever it is, anything that's a threat to those things, then that's a threat to democracy.
I think the logic was something like that all of these organisations, these deep state organisations, exist as a result of having been put there by previous democratic mandates. So it's a well of democracy bound up in them, like carbon in a bloody oak tree or something, that means that it's more democratic than things like elections. That was something like the logic.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Mike Benz was saying that their rationale for it, their reasoning, their argument goes that democracy isn't really the will of the people at the ballot box, it's the institutions of the state.
Yes, that was it, yeah.
And obviously that's nonsense, right? But yeah, so news media, big science, universities, government itself, anything that threatens those things, that's a quote-unquote threat to democracy. Populism itself. You can't be allowed to vote for the wrong person. You can't vote in favour of a Brexit or a Frexit.
Yeah, or AFD must be banned and all that.
You can't vote. You shouldn't be able to vote for Trump because he's a quote-unquote threat to democracy. So anyway, look, can we play Samson? If you teed it up to the timestamp bit I said, it looks like you have. If we watch just 2 or 3, 4 minutes of this, I think it's one of the most interesting bits.
Especially with your nose open.
No, that's fantastic. So a few things as background. Arizona State University, its current president, Michael Crow, is now and was since the day it was born in 1999 the chairman of In-Q-Tel. In-Q-Tel is the CIA's venture capital arm. This is literally the CIA's proprietary investments in early stage technology companies. And the head of Arizona State University, its president, is the chairman of In-Q-Tel and has been for 25 years. Arizona State University has these very deep partnerships with John McCain, who was the senator from Arizona. John McCain, who ran for president against Barack Obama in 2008, before he ran for president in 2008, for 25 years, he was the founder and the president of the IRI, the CIA wing of the Republican Party. Again, the IRI is the GOP side of the National Endowment for Democracy. That's effectively self-declared CIA cutout. And in fact, Arizona State University has a John McCain Center on Disinformation that works in tandem with this one. But I just wanted to show that you'll see this is technically it's Arizona State University, but you'll see that it is an intelligence program. So if you just scroll up for a second, you'll see at the bottom, right? This is a program at Arizona State University that is an intelligence program. Its job is to assist the intelligence community with this work. And if you scroll down, and you can scroll down from here, you'll see the different branches, and then click on the one narrative, disinformation, and strategic influence. Now, this program has a $1.6 million grant from the Pentagon to do censorship work. It has $300,000 in grants from the State Department. It's got another almost $500,000 worth of additional government grants from adjacent U.S. government diplomatic statecraft intelligence folks. So this is a multi-million-dollar censorship center, currently still up and running at Arizona State University, funded by us. Now, if you click on why is disinformation dangerous, I want to show you something real quick, because this language is everywhere. This is stock standard language. Why do we have this set up? Disinformation sows confusion and distrust, diminishing people's faith and confidence in the institutions that are critical to a functioning, healthy democracy, such as government, news media, and science. I'm going to pause right there. The dirty tricks that this is laden with is what allows them to get away with this. So note that they are saying that they have set up this apparatus, and we can get it. I can show you the different projects they're involved with on the censorship side. But the issue they're saying is not that something's wrong, but that the simple act of diminishing public faith and confidence in the news media, government, and science is an attack on democracy. This is the identical language that.
There you go. It goes on. It's a really, very, very interesting podcast. Slightly interesting that he talks about everything from James Angleton to Burisma, but doesn't mention Israel once. But nonetheless, it's very, very, very interesting. Lots and lots of very, very interesting stuff there. And yeah, he talks a fair bit about the Atlantic Council. There you go. It's organisations like this, which most people haven't really heard of, but in fact pull all sorts of levers all over the world. NED, another very, very important.
National Endowment for Democracy.
Yeah, very, very, very important.
Yes.
Apparently they get more funding than the CIA, these people.
Really?
Yeah, silly amounts of money. There you go. Again, it's all a matter of record. I'm not making any of this up. It's all there in black and white. In-Q-Tel, yeah, match made in hell.
So, I mean, presumably they're step one of the colour revolutions.
Yeah, it's exactly the sort of thing they do. Yeah, exactly. And then it's just been turned on to America. And so now we live in a world. The irony of it, that misinformation and disinformation projects are the ones that are actually peddling the most pernicious and nefarious misinformation and disinformation and lies by omission and censorship and the whole 9 yards. Net result of it is we end up with something like BBC Verifier and Mariana Spring, obviously just a shill, telling us what is and isn't true, even though you immediately know from podcast 1 that they're lying.
Yes.
I've got no integrity whatsoever. But she knows. She's the arbiter of truth for you.
Oh, she knows what she is.
There you go. She'll tell you what is or isn't real. Okay. So, hopefully that was interesting for people. Whether Trump will be able to dismantle, because that was one of the things that Joe and Mike also talked about. Whether Trump's going to, because hopefully, if Trump says he's going to do what he says, try and dismantle a lot of this, or as much of this as possible. Obviously, cut their funding is the first thing. Try and dismantle this, because it's relatively, I mean, in one sense it's been around since forever, in another sense it's mainly been around since World War II, but in a big way it's only been around since 2014, 2016. A lot of that most recent edifice of it isn't that old, and maybe it is possible to sweep it away and go back to like a...
Because if you try and cut the funding for the CIA, I mean, there'll be all sorts of hoo-ha about that, and people have an image of it because it's in the movies all the time. But if you just cut the funding to the National Endowment for Democracy, Who's gonna want to die on that hill?
Or just like a break up the Atlantic Council. Yeah, just say, oh well, no, that's a subversive thing. It's not in the interests of these United States to let that exist anymore.
That is an interesting point, because so much of the iceberg is below water at this point that you could there's a lot of it you could go after without actually causing that much waves.
Well, Jimmy Carter just fired like a third of the CIA in one day once. You know that?
Based.
Yeah. So, and they didn't shoot him in the head in public in Texas, did they?
No, he didn't get re-elected though. But
yeah, they still tried to undermine him at every possible turn. Still.
Yeah.
But there you go. I hope. I think it is very, very interesting, the censorship industrial complex that we now live with, and whether it will be able to be confronted properly and ultimately defeated. We shall see. Time will tell.
Thanks for watching, folks. If you'd like to support us, go sign up to the website, £5 a month, or you could buy someone a premium gift subscription, which is a new feature that we have, and go and watch Bo's Epoch series on the rise of Vercingetorix. He's doing a very, very long and very, very detailed breakdown of the life of Julius Caesar. And of course, part 13 is Vercingetorix becoming the opposition, the Celtic opposition to Julius Caesar. I'm not going to spoil it. Go and watch that. And of course, go and follow us on X, at lotuseaters_com for when we upload things and for more information.